Hello, welcome to Insight. Today on Insight, we will discuss Ethiopia in transition. For this discussion, we have invited Professor Dr. Abbink, who is a Professor Emeritus Governance at Leiden University. He's also an anthropologist and historian and researcher at Leiden University. And he has authored a number of articles about Ethiopia. He has done numerous research, and he's a renowned figure in his field of studies. Professor, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Okay, I will just start. How did you get involved into Ethiopia and Ethiopian affairs?
Wow, I have to go back in dark history. When I was doing after my PhD research, which was not on Ethiopia, I just wanted to have an experience in an interesting African country. And I studied, I explored, and I found Ethiopia, when I read about it, one of the most interesting, most diverse, most fascinating countries because of its historical legacy, its ethnic diversity, its various landscapes and historical aspects. So, and then I took, of course, phase two, I took an area which was not so much studied, which was ethnography, ethnology of the Southwest. So basically I started my research in the Maji area, one of the remote parts of the country. I started, in fact, of course, in the Derg time, my field work, the last year of the Derg time, and continued that across the past few decades. Ethnology, ethnohistory, political sociology, also livelihood studies, and in the course of that engagement with the country, which has always been extremely fascinating to me because of its people also and because of its its richness. I also wandered into political studies, so to speak, because I saw doing field work in a kind of classical anthropological ethnographic way. I saw the relevance of politics and the relevance of national level and regional level arrangements on the local settings where I was doing research. So that's basically the short background, the short version of the background of my engagement in the country.
Okay, so when we move to today's interview, what is your current assessment of Ethiopia?
That's a huge question, but let me try to make a few remarks. My view on the country. I mean, yeah, of course, we have been seeing this conflict in the north. Ethiopia is again at a crossroads. I mean, it's a country which is often at the crossroads, but now it's very serious in terms of its federal order and in terms of political stability. At the same time, it's also an era, a kind of historical juncture where we are in, which has more promise than few moments before in terms of the reformist regime of the new Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed. Still, I mean, there's a lot of potential, a lot of promise, and also a lot of achievements. Of course, it has been much discussed whether this transition which we are seeing, towards the elections, of course, of June this year, whether it's still on track, whether it still has the same promise, that stands to be seen. But I personally think that it has still this promise. But, the country faces extremely serious challenges in the political, in the economic, but also, let's say, in the socio-cultural sense, in terms of the relationships between regions, ethno-regions and peoples, and especially their elites. And there, we have to trust that the Prime Minister and his team and his government are doing a good job. I think we have to give him trust. I mean, he is a leader, I think, objectively speaking, who is, very unique to Ethiopia. We haven't seen such a leader before. The commitment is great. His popularity is still really substantial. So we have a extremely fascinating, but also somewhat tragic period of transition, which will be tested in this, specifically this year, the aftermath, of course, of the Tigray conflict, but also the election campaigns and the post-election government formation, as well as the phase number 2, let's say, the post-election phase of the reform process, which has been started in 2018. And after the elections, you will see that there will be new negotiations, there will be a rethinking of various laws and issues. So we have these multiple challenges, but you know, there's always hope, and we should keep that hope, and we should use, I mean, the country should use the opportunities which are really there.
Mm-hmm. So, as you said, there is a lot of danger, but also opportunities. So let's take the opportunities. What are, can you give us a couple of examples that would make a difference in terms of making the opportunities realistic? What are the key achievements that are needed from the leadership and from the elite that would minimize the danger and also maximize the benefits to the country?
Much will be, you know, will come in the political process ahead of us in the run-up to the elections. But you know, overlooking the past 2.5 years, you know, we have now this terrible conflict in Tigray. I mean, which has been going on and which still not totally solved. This has, of course, blighted the reform process. Still, the major structures and the major approaches, the major political setup of that reform process, which has been started, let's say after April 2018, are still there. And pending a satisfactory, you know, solution and re-engagement of the Tigray region in this process, I'm not sure how that is going to be, but we can talk about that maybe later. Pending this process, the promises of the transition can still be kept. For one, there is of course the political dispensation. We have of course the post-EPRDF period. We have now with the Prosperity Party a new political approach to politics. It has often been said by the government and by Abbink specifically that a change is needed in the political culture of Ethiopia. He's very right there. I mean, and he has also achieved major strides done major strides in reforming that process. We have seen of course, the invitation back of all kinds of opposition parties, of also the previously violent ones. We have seen the cancellation of particularly oppressive laws. We have seen a much more sustained effort to build an inclusive economy across the regions of the country. So not only, you know, a kind of biased economy benefiting a few elites or something. So, and he has been actively engaging also the regional peace in the wider Horn of Africa, and especially in the first 2 years. I mean, there has been success. You know, there has been re-engagement with Somalia, with Somaliland, with South Sudan, where the government of Ethiopia played a big role. There has been also rapprochement with Sudan before the current border issue emerged suddenly in December last year. So the principles of approaching politics, the principles of approaching foreign policy, as well as domestic policy in terms of engaging and opening up the field for all kinds of parties without much restriction in the campaign process, in the future legal process after the elections, are still there. I mean, and this is a situation we have not seen in the past 50 years. There was no serious multi-party politics. There was no serious engagement of the political model which was put in place either under the Derek or under the EPRDF in the early years. These things have been the issue of enormous debate, which is healthy, which is you know, going to be productive and will be translated into the electoral process. It's a pity that, of course, some parties now decide not to participate in the electoral process. I don't know. Never understood why that is. I do not understand why the same party again says no in terms of in not participating. But so be it. They lose out. They miss out. I think there is more than ever the possibility to get a fairly, you know, transparent and dynamic and fairly level playing field in terms of the electoral process in June. So that is a major thing, because, you know, after the elections we will see a kind of acceleration of the political reform process. So that is the challenge which is promising. Secondly, we have seen, of course, in the economic field, there are, I think, basically, if you look at Ethiopia, basically the major challenges are, the underlying challenges are economic and demographic. And these issues are not easily solved by a 5-year term government. Economic investments are ongoing, but have been dropping a bit because of instability. You see always these going movements ups and down related to political instability. You have, but you know, the promise of Ethiopia in the economic field is simply it is there. I mean, there is a large labor force. There is, you know, plenty of opportunity to develop the industrial sector, and we must say that under the previous regime, this industrial sector has been opened by the EPRDF. I mean, they have at least achieved some economic dynamics. We should really recognize that, but it can be much improved, especially in the terms of the equity and the inclusiveness of the process, and thereby, you know, federal policies and negotiations with the federal governments is extremely important. But there is promise, but there is also a great challenge, because we have this unemployment problem in Ethiopia. We have a large youth contingent, and you know, if you do not make a big dent in youth unemployment and so forth, you will not make really major headway. So that is the big challenge. Demographically, it's related. I mean, the high population growth. Ethiopia is one of the has one of the larger growth rates in Africa in terms of population. It's going down in the cities, but still it is substantial. These things will be addressed. I mean, the government, I think, is fully aware of these challenges and does its best to engage and to invite foreign direct investment. I'm engaged in one study project in Ethiopia, which is looking exactly in that issue of foreign direct investment, how to stimulate that, how to enhance that. But if these issues are tackled, especially in a way which is politically satisfying to the regions and the regional governments, that you build trust, and that you as regional governments see that, you know, the investments are, let's say, spread across the country and not concentrated in one country or in one sector only, then you have a lot of promise and challenge which can be met. And then we come, of course, to the issue of foreign engagement. I mean, there is a lot of interest in principle from foreign partners to invest in Ethiopia. But you know, they will look at the foreign security situation. They will look at the legal situation, and that these are factors which cannot be totally predicted, of course.
Mm-hmm. I want to narrow the first couple of questions to the political area. Of course, in order for Ethiopia to get foreign direct investment, also for economic development, there has to be some political stability. So what we see over the last 2 years is, while the Prime Minister is appreciated for his pragmatism, but the political order encourages ethnic fragmentation. It is not conducive to create a democratic society, because it is based on separating the different ethnic groups, I should say. So many people say that while in 2 years he may not have enough time to change the constitution and the political order for the country to be stable, the current political order has to change in a way that it focuses on individual rights while acknowledging and protecting group rights. Do you think the constitution and the current political order is a problem for the transition, also the main cause for the conflict between TPLF and the federal government?
Well, yeah, it's a much discussed issue, and we will not suffice this hour or next 2 hours to discuss that. But I think your interpretation is radical. You pose the effects of ethnic federalism against individual rights and so forth. That is an interpretation which is growing, is heard often, and also in the literature, in the scientific literature, political science literature, we see it a lot. I would say that indeed there is a contradiction between the aftermath of ethnic-based federalism, as we saw under the EHADIC in the past 27 years until, let's say, 2018. And, trans-regional, issue-based politics in the field of economics, social policy, as well as political representation. That I think that is true. There is a kind of contradiction. Many of the national development schemes, like plantations, like big industrial complexes, like even maybe the dams, the dams built, they are trans-regional, they are trans-ethnic, or whatever you may call it. So there is a contradiction between these national development ideas and the, let's say, what people often call ethnic fragmentation or ethnic regionalization. That is true. I think at the same time, we cannot radically change that from one day to the other. That is not feasible and also not advisable, because one element which has been stimulated by this model by EPRDF is the fact that there has been recognition of diversity. That's the positive thing. That it has led, on the basis of constitutional principles, to a total politicization of ethnic identity. That is a very unfortunate side effect, of which we see now the limits, I think. I mean, many, if not most, observers of politics in Ethiopia would now come to that conclusion. You cannot go further in what you and other observers have termed ethnic fragmentation. It cannot go further than that, except it could, except when you go to autonomy and secession of all the regions, which is, of course, suicidal and economically highly damaging to the country and even to the region themselves. So I think, the careful rethinking of how to optimize the ethnic-based federation, the ethno-regional federation, and to optimize it in terms of cooperation and issue-based politics, federal issue-based politics, is in progress, has been started by Abiy, by Prime Minister Abiy. And that process, I think, should continue and it would be advisable to continue that and to experiment with that, to develop trans-region cooperative structures, politically, economically, and so forth. But as I said, I think you cannot radically from one day to the other say we have to change the constitution totally, we have to get rid of ethnic federalism. That is not feasible. I also have in many of my articles noted the limits and the damaging effect of politicization of ethnic identity. I think no country in the end has survived such a model. No country in the world. Yugoslavia not, Russia not. I mean, you can mention other countries. And most African countries have also avoided such a model in the post-colonial era, of course. There is no country which has defined ethnicity in such a radical administrative way as Ethiopia has done. So there is going to be a process of rethinking, but it has to be done very carefully. It has to engage all the stakeholders. But ultimately, I think it is in the advantage of both the federation and the power of the regions to improve that synergy between the two levels. Recognize diversity, but not, imposing it and making it a straitjacket, and improve collaboration and issue-based politics on the federal level. That's the only way forward.
Do you think after the election, sometimes in the next 2-3 years, exactly to address what you said, on the one hand, to give recognition to diversity and to respect language and religion, diverse languages and religion, on the other hand, to increase issue-based politics? Do you think national reconciliation, something in the form of the one we saw in South Africa, will be effective and useful for Ethiopia?
A national reconciliation, some kind of truth and reconciliation committee-led transition, you mean? Yeah, meaning coming together, talking about the misdeeds of the past and so forth. Yeah, the idea looks nice, sounds good. Yeah, but if the elections are well organized and can be held in free and fair conditions, then the electoral process will achieve this. It will lead to the recognition of all parties in the parliament, I guess, if it goes well. And then you can deliberate such things in the parliament after June.
Yeah, if I may interrupt for a minute. I think what I meant is not to replace the government, but there are part of the division in Ethiopia among the elite. Elite is because of history, because of grievances, because of territorial conflicts, and even the constitution and how the constitution was formed, not as part of the power sharing agreement. I mean, the election will decide the power sharing agreement in the parliament. But after that, would it make sense to have a national reconciliation so that the future of Ethiopia in terms of narratives and acknowledgement of past wrongs or common vision and things like that, to chart that, would that be useful? I'm not saying as a replacement or as an alternate to the election, after the election.
Well, yeah, the idea sounds good. I mean, that is in itself an attractive idea, to have a forum, you know, where all groups, not only parties but also other aggrieved groups, could talk about their historical experience and their feelings of you know, being ruled over, being oppressed or whatever, or having been the undue victim of repression. That would be in itself, in the abstract, a good idea. I'm just wondering about what kind of, you know, format that would have to be, and if there would be any kind of legal status to that. But if the parties which feel attracted to that idea, from the government to the regional governments to NGOs to all kinds of local groups and ethnic associations, are susceptible and sympathetic to the idea, then you could indeed have such a process. If it contributes to, you know, to reconsidering Ethiopian history, recent Ethiopian history of the past 100 or even more years, or even or shorter, whatever they choose. And if they have a forum to voice their concerns, that would be good. But still, then there will be a kind of, probably a demand for a kind of political follow-up. But okay, and that would be, of course, in the parliament. But your idea is fine, I think. It is something. But I'm wondering about the format and about who will organize that. That is, yeah. It's an interesting idea. Yeah.
Actually, Dr. Abiy has set up a shop for national reconciliation. So I want to go to the next question, briefly, you, in one of your writings, you talk about self-serving, irresponsible Ethiopian elites. I tend to agree with you, but I would like you to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe that was in a kind of blog piece that I wrote that, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I would not write that so directly in a kind of social scientific article. So yeah, I think that was because of, yeah, I think that elites in Ethiopia of many parties, opposition included, and also the past ruling parties, you know, they have not been marked by quality leadership. I mean, there are many substandard quality leaders, you know, whining about perceived and real grievances, but they get stuck in that mode. I often see no imaginative political vision of the way forward, as if the past dictates solutions for the future, in many respects. Secondly, what I meant with that remark is that all kinds of new would-be elites have been appointing themselves as being leaders of smaller ethnic groups across the country. You name it, in the south, in the Amhara region or in the Oromo region, groups which think they have the right to form a party or a region or a sub-region or a special Waradam or Liu Waradam Manam or whatever. And that, I think, is often politically not serving the constituencies, but serving themselves. I mean, it is a very interesting job creation mechanism for themselves, but often I find the link to the constituency very tenuous. So that process, I mean, I think that process is stimulated by the current, or by the, let's say, the inherited form of ethnic-based federalism, which we have seen in the past 29 years. And that is an unfortunate side effect which should be avoided, which should be limited in some way.
So I want to, for a brief time, I want to visit the issue in Tigray. As you know, a little over 3 months ago, the TPLF attacked the Northern Command, and then the Ethiopian federal government took a law and order operation, and we know what's going on. How do you foresee a conclusion of the conflict and the reintegration of Tigray into the main politics, the body politic of Ethiopia?
It's a big challenge. It's going to take time, and but it has to happen. I mean, I am deeply sorry for this terrible human suffering caused in this conflict. I mean, it is for both the people victim of massacres like in Maikadra and elsewhere in Humara, and also the common people in Tigray, which did not ask for this war, the ordinary people, the farmers, the traders, who did not ask for this war and are caught in the middle. I'm sure that the majority of the Tigrayan population want to re-engage with Ethiopia. I mean, we have never been able to hear really what the Tigray people think about either their governments, the TPLF-led government, or about the federal government. We have never been able to hear voices. They have always been spoken for by these kind of elite people in the political spectrum and in the media, especially in media, of course. So we don't know. I think they would welcome a re-engagement with Ethiopia. The conditions for that are difficult. It's a laborious process. Much depends on the way the federal army and the federal administration and the interim administration in Tigray handle things. It's sensitive, but the only way forward is to really engage the people and the stakeholders in Tigray, even if they come from a background which we may not like, which one may not like parts of the TPLF and so forth. Somehow they have to be engaged. Not the leadership, which is totally out of the question, I think. That will not be accepted by the federal government and by other groups in the country, but by people who want to, reach out and want to rebuild Tigray. It's going to be a political process. It's going to be a process to be assisted by, of course, more humanitarian aid and more economic rebuilding of the area. So there is a possibility, but it will really take time. Really take time to do this. It's not impossible. I think that ultimately the agenda of the Tigray leadership, the TPLF leadership now dismantled, was not to secede from Ethiopia, because that would be throwing in their own glasses, because they were so dependent economically, financially on Ethiopia, but they would rather take over power again in Addis Ababa, it seems. So, and that idea that Tigray should be separate is not, according to me, a popular idea among the larger population, except among some vocal spokespersons in the media or in the diaspora who talk about secession. I think it's not going to work. So the political challenge is there, but the political challenge of reintegrating and engaging the population and the emerging new medium-level leadership in Tigray will emerge, but will be dependent, I think, on a fair and meaningful economic and administrative and financial engagement of the federal government. A lot of aid is going there. I mean, there are restrictions still. The humanitarian aid is not fully operational. I mean, we hear all these critiques of foreign agencies, of course, but it will continue. It is interesting and heartening to see that from many areas in Ethiopia, outside Tigray, from Oromia, from Amara, from the south, so many people and organizations and medium-level leaders are offering help, material support, and so forth to Tigray, to rebuild Tigray. I find that, yeah, amazing and good. I mean, also I know personally, many people, many individuals who have been, giving money, even cattle and food and so forth to be sent to Tigray. So there is in principle, this process, this attitude of willingness to re-engage, and that should be the case. It should be a process both from Tigray as well as from the rest of Ethiopia to build that. I think the federal government will keep on supporting that. They know that this is crucial to keep the support and to build new support in Tigray for this process. And we have to wait and see. We cannot make serious, hard 100% predictions on that. But I think the way forward is set out and is in principle is promising.
As you said, the challenge is quite big. What most Ethiopians find is that the Europeans, particularly the EU countries, seem not to understand what it takes to rebuild a country in conflict, and they seem to be coming hard on the Abiy government, at least politically. What is your take on that?
Yeah, this is I find one of the most strange and disturbing, and I must also say irritating phenomena of today. That attitude of Western governments, especially in Europe, indeed, towards not wanting to help, not blocking aid already promised in principle, the 88 million euros last year, and now they talk about the other 110 million coming up, also to be blocked. We have read, of course, the statement by this lady, this European lady who is in charge of development aid. What's her name? Jutta Urpilainen, the Finnish Commissioner for International Partnerships. Yeah. I find this stunning, really. I find this shocking and dumb, because first of all, she doesn't know the background, and she lets herself be informed by half-baked reports which do not reflect really much of the situation on the ground. Secondly, it is really a letter of distrust towards the federal government and towards the Prime Minister in Ethiopia. Thirdly, calling for blocking the aid, and also calling for a unified attitude, line of all the Western countries, he says, including Canada and the World Bank and the IMF, to even, ultimately block Ethiopia's access to credits from the IMF. I find that almost immoral. I find this totally unacceptable. And also, it is stupid, because in this way, Europe is undermining its economic links and its building up of economic markets in Ethiopia, and will also push the country towards other credit givers like Russia, like China, like other countries which we don't like so much. And I'm not sure even if most Ethiopians like to be dependent on Russia or of China. But this will happen if the Europeans, with their, let's say, a bit sanctimonious attitude, try to tell if sovereign government what to do on the basis of information which is not really correct or really complete. There are issues, of course, in Tigray. We know that there is problems of humanitarian access, but they are not only the doing of the federal government and the federal army not giving access, but there are other factors at hand as well. So I find the attitude of the Europeans, and one of my minister here in Holland, the Minister of Development Aid here, Mrs. Kaag, she was one of the first to stop millions of development aid programs I think in late November already, because of the so-called perceived abuse or whatever, or war in Tigray. I find this, as I said, strange and not at all helpful. The people of Tigray are not helped. Nobody is helped by this. Nobody. Only the moral feeling of Europeans is helped by it, if they want to show that they are so moral and concerned about people. But even then, it's not working. So not good.
So, as you said, Ethiopia might be forced to look for help from the Russians or the Chinese. On the other hand, it may precipitate a state failure. If Ethiopia fails, 100 million people would be in danger. Not only that, the issue of migration becomes an issue. Just a few years ago, we saw the issue of Syrian migrants and its political impact on Europe. So for many of us, like me, who are observers, the European moral, I don't know how to characterize it, moral superiority or moral, it doesn't seem to concentrate on realistic solutions, on trying to work out a solution. So I have to say many Ethiopians are a little bit puzzled why the Europeans are not understanding what's going on in Ethiopia.
Yeah, it is puzzling. But you know, look at the media discourse. I mean, it is. If you even look at, it's a subject of a study in itself. Media representation, media narratives on Ethiopia in the global press. That would be a very interesting scientific study, you know, to see the Economist, the Guardian, the BBC, in my country, the mainstream media like the newspapers and the public broadcasting system. They have this narrative that the TPLF or the Tigray people are the underdog and thus, of course, automatically have to be supported. They do not see what the record of TPLF was before this whole conflict started, and the kind of questionable things which were practiced at that time, and they forgot the human rights record, which was not too positive before 2018. They forget that, and they seem to go underdog mode. Underdog is always right, so has to be supported. I mean, that's part of the problem. What you mentioned about the danger that they don't see Ethiopia becoming a possible failing state or failed state. I personally don't think that is going to happen soon. We should not underestimate that. There will, of course, be instability. We have seen instability in Benishangul Gumuz, in Oromia area, in the Somali-Oromia border area, in Amhara region. Instability will be there. But I don't think that there is really, going to be a kind of total collapse of the state. Don't underestimate that, I think. But you are right, the migration issue, out-migration will continue to the Middle East, to Egypt and going to Europe maybe. It may increase if the problems in Ethiopia increase. But if you ask that to the Europeans, they haven't even thought about that, I think, the European policymakers. They haven't thought about these longer-term issues. They know that they are there in principle, but they look really at these conflicts. Armed conflict should not happen. Yes, it's terrible, and therefore we should have some kind of sanctions, or we should point out to policymakers or to leaders who start wars that they should not do that. And I think we have to, in general, I mean, integrity and honesty and reporting should be improved. People in the media and in research, also many researchers, I must say. I have colleagues whose attitude and whose gullibility in terms of believing so-called eyewitness accounts is to me quite surprising. It is demonstrably not true on certain issues. They have been doing research in Tigray or in other areas in Ethiopia, and suddenly they turn against the government and so forth in inordinately vehement ways. I find that difficult. So we have to try to strive for the whole picture, to see the context of the conflicts, what has led to it, and what is now unfolding, what the options are, and strive for to be as complete as possible in our information and show integrity. I mean, it's difficult for everybody. We are all scrambling to check the information, what is right, what is not right, and what is reliable and what not. But we should, before we are reasonably sure about what's happening and what's going on, we should not make bold statements. And I find that in the media and in many of the academic commentaries, things are like that. I'm not saying that I have always have the right 100% interpretation. Of course not, but I am hesitant to run to the media all the time and blah blah around things which have happened or may not have happened. So it's a challenge to keep that, to challenge the narrative which is now reigning in the media. We have to challenge that narrative by information, by facts, by presenting the larger, as complete as possible context of the ongoing challenges in the country.
Mm-hmm. Finally, I wanna come back to the coming elections. I know you talked about the elections earlier on, but what do you think? How can Europe particularly help Ethiopia conduct a successful election that will stabilize the country?
Well, they could first of all they could give financial support. That's one. In many election processes in transitional situation in transitional countries, Western donors give money for the organization of elections, for the organization of supporting structures like the National Electoral Board or material printing or information material. There they could give financial support in organizing the process. Secondly, I have no doubt that the government of Ethiopia will invite observers, international observers, election observers, and that would be a good thing. I think. I mean, that would be this is to be encouraged, and then they can give some, and they should maybe not be too restrictive, European and let alone U.S. Experts and politicians, not to be too prescriptive or moralizing about that Ethiopia should really have good elections and should be nice and this and that. Let's just give them a chance to organize it, support the logistics where possible, support the information procurement to the Ethiopian public, as well as provide reliable and serious election observers for it to have its course and to improve the quality of the elections. I think that is a very feasible and doable strategy.
Mm-hmm. The other area where Europe can help, many people say, is to both help and pressure opposition parties to participate in the election, not to boycott the election, but also when they participate, to participate constructively. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, certainly, no doubt about it. I mean, the first boycott of the elections has been registered today. I think one of the groups is saying we are not going to participate because we have to release political prisoners or whatever they say. I think it's not useful. So certainly, I mean, these are going to be, one of the best elections to be held in Ethiopia. I guess we had a fairly good one in 2005, although it was of course totally botched in the aftermath because the opposition won too many seats in 2005, and there was killing and this and that and demonstrations, terrible things. But this one also, if I see how the Prosperity Party and the Prime Minister have been setting out, the conditions for the elections, I mean, stimulating opposition parties to be strong, to engage, and also admonishing his own party, the PP, not to think that they have already run race and that they should denigrate and belittle the opposition parties. That is good. These are good signs that the process will be, much freer than any previous election, and the electoral board is doing its best to keep its independence and to try and realize these conditions. And in that framework, there is all reason for European countries, if they so wish and if they think they can make a contribution, to stimulate all political parties, especially indeed the opposition parties, to participate. Because if you don't participate, you again lose a chance. Then you have, of course, as opposition party, you have the satisfaction of again grumbling and moping about the chances missed. But some people seem to like that. They seem to eternally want to mope about missed chances. But let them do that. I mean, anyway, the position for the Europeans would be to really try and convince them, you know, get at least your party in the elections, get at least some representation in the parliament, and engage the parliament in the government to be formed, probably a coalition government afterwards, after June, to engage with you and enhance, in that respect, enhance national dialogue about policy issues.
Is an area I didn't touch on. Let me give you a chance.
Which one? I didn't hear you.
I just want you to, if I didn't cover any particular area of interest, I want to give you a chance.
Well, no, you have been giving me a good list of questions. I mean, the media we have discussed, the bias in the media. We have discussed the chances of, you know, positive political change coming. We have perhaps, yeah, not really discussed the underlying issues of economics and demographics, which I mentioned. I think we should never underestimate the longer-term challenges. I mean, the political process is one thing, but we should really take into account the social structural, the demographic structural, and the economic issues of Ethiopian society. There are the real long-term and medium-term challenges which any government has to deal with, and not only the federal government but also the regional governments. And there, of course, regional governments know best what is happening in their own regions. They should really work hard on the inventorizing and developing of tailor-made economic policies in their own regions and in collaboration with the federal government. I think demography, economy, managerial issues, trans-region economic investments should be much more central in the political deliberations of the Ethiopian leadership.
Professor Abbink, thank you very much, and I hope to see you on another program, and thank you very much.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been Insight for today. This is our program. Until next time, goodbye.